set of intellectual people who constitute and who try to guide us in different directions as far as possible. These are the people who involve in terms of understanding the process, setting it right, how do we need to take it forward. And you again need people to guide you, to tell you how to book the profits, how to launch an IPO, what are the accounting standards. They have some standards altogether in terms of getting us into the business, into the ideologies altogether. Good morning and welcome to the second session of IFRS. And as we were speaking about the International Financial Reporting Standards, in this session, we are going to talk about a very, very important factor called as the IASB and its structure, the International Accounting Standard Boards and its structure. The session is actually trying to make us understand a very, very small component about what IASB is and how does it really come into in terms of understanding the potential factors that are involved in terms of the accounting standards. So let's go further and try to understand the IASB. This is a board which is independent group of experts with appropriate mix of recent and practical experience in setting accounting standards, in preparing, auditing, using financial reports, and in reporting education. Now, this is a fantastic statement that we need to understand all about. The IASB consists of people who are a part of the board, who consist of people with a lot of practical experiences. They have a lot of insights about how accounting needs to be done, what are the standards that we need to follow, and how do we need to take the standards all together. So probably when you look into the geographical diversity also, there is a huge amount of diversity that you can see in the IASB. Now, when I talk about this word called as diversity altogether, this matters a lot. Why? Because people from different backgrounds, from different countries join this board. They have been elected by the board members who will come forward and who will look into the financial reports. They will assess the standards. They will try to find out what is the best way, what are the best methods by which we can understand the accounting standards, we can understand the accounting phenomenon altogether and take it forward. So this is a very, very interesting chapter and a very, very interesting methodology altogether. Now, this is highly needed these days. Why? Because when you look at the accounting standards altogether, this has been a very, very important factor that tries to tells us about what are the standards that has to be understood, what are the methodologies that has to be understood. And when the board members come with the practical insights, they also tell us that, for example, what are the key patterns, how do we need to use it, how the ratios are coming into it, how do we use the calculator, how do we use the standards in terms of interpreting. All those factors will start coming inside, and this board is a very, very set of intellectual people who constitute and who try to guide us in different directions as far as possible. Now, moving forward, the members of IASB, there are 4 committee members: the Foundation Committee, the Due Process Committee, the Trustees Committee, Interpretations Committee. So now you can look into the diversity altogether. The International Accounting Standard Board has got committees from all over the world, from all over the places. Why? Because all of these people play a very, very important role in terms of understanding the functions of IASB. So now when we talk about the Foundation Committee, the Foundation Committee members are the people who come in terms of the history, the founding members of IASB. They are like there right from the beginning, from the origin altogether. The foundation members laid the stone in terms of building up a strong accounting fundamental background, and these people play a very, very important role in terms of understanding what are the accounting practices, how the standards were set, what standards have been followed, and how we need to carry the tradition forward. Followed by the Due Process Committee. The Due Process Committee means that these are are the people who involve in terms of understanding the process, setting it right, how do we need to take it forward, and how do we need to understand it. Now, let me give you an example here. Now, for example, when you look into the big accounting firms like Ernst & Young, Deloitte and Touche, or we are talking about PwC, KPMG, and all these big accounting firms, they have their own standards, they have their own methodology. Of course, they have a lot of people who have understood the accounting standards. They are experts in their own views, in their own thought process. But then there might be areas where you require certain process, certain standardization, certain methodology of taking things forward. So in that category, in that context, always the process committee is coming into picture. It tries to understand, it tries to make you go through the factors of how things are happening and how things need to be taken forward. So the due process committee is a very, very important committee that tries to understand the different factors, the different functions of the business altogether. Plus, you have the trustees committee. Now, the trustees committee, this is being an open board for the trustees, for the committees to come in. The trustees committee is normally comprising of people who are from different walks of life. They are people who try to understand the basic foundation, the ethics, the value. So they are like the founding group members. Again, they have the responsibility of taking this entire thing or the entire sessions in terms of the business, the process, the standards to the next level as far as possible. So the trustees are the basic board members, and they are nominated from different countries who in charge or who intake go forward in terms of understanding the growth, understanding the patterns that are going forward in terms of the accounting. Followed by the interpretations committee altogether. Interpretation. Now, for example, in accounting, there are several ratios, several terms and terminologies which needs to be interpreted. It cannot be just assumed or it cannot be taken for granted. Now, for example, if I am going to say return on investment, or if I am going to say cash ratios, or if I am going to say revenue, what is the meaning of each and every term that has been specified under this particular subheading? Why? Because normally what happens is that when you are into the process of accounting, you might have thought about something in your mind and you might have written something else on the paper. Now, but the intention, the meaning is not here to cheat. It is not meant to, take the customers for a ride. But what happens is that when the entire meaning or the entire subheading is not being interpreted properly, it is not being given a proper subheading or a title altogether, the meaning can change and it might be taken in the wrong sense altogether. So that is why it is very, very important that we have a committee called as the interpretations committee, which sit and tries to understand about the different norms, different regulation, interpret it to the local language, try to take it forward in terms of understanding the entire process. So the interpretation committee is a very, very important committee that will try to understand, that will try to make a difference altogether in terms of understanding, in terms of bringing in the results for the factor. They also help to put on the various process. Now, for example, in French language, the return on investment might be a different term. In German, it might be different. In Japanese, it might be different. In Indian, it might be different. So they try to bring in a common language, a common value pattern through which the results can be interpreted and can be forwarded altogether. Followed by the advisory role altogether. Now, this is a very, very interesting thing that you need to understand in terms of the accounting. The Accounting Standards Advisory Forum. For every organization today in the world, they need a consultant. They need an advisor altogether. Now, what happens because of this? The advisor is actually a person who comes forward in terms of making things understand in terms of making the organization understand the importance of accounting. It is not that an organization will not know about accounting, will not know about the balance sheet. They know everything. They probably even know in-depth process of what they are doing altogether. But then IASB has got this accounting standards board who go and take up the role of consultant. They tell the organization what are the right methods, what are the do's and don'ts in terms of the accounting standards, in terms of the accounting patterns altogether. So what they try to do is that they conduct forums, they conduct workshops, they nominate people, they try to make you join through the various forums and circles where they would advise you about the accounting standards, the accounting functions altogether. So that is why the accounting standards board will be always interested in terms of floating with ideas, in terms of giving out the thought process and the functionalities altogether. That's a very, very important thing that you can see when it comes to the advisory forum. Followed by the capital markets advisory team. Now, when you look into the stock market, when you look into the capital markets, whether it might be on an investment basis or it might be about raising funds or it might be floating upon IPO or whichever factor, you again need people to guide you, to tell you how to book the profits, how to launch an IPO, what are the accounting standards, what are the consulting factors, how we are going to raise the fund, where it needs to be booked. So several questions that start coming across in terms of understanding the very basic of an advisory, that too especially in capital markets. So what does these accounting standard boards do is that they take up this job, they advise people in terms of how to manage, where to manage, how to take it forward. Are there some changes? Are there some analysis? Are there some reportory evidences that we need to do so that we are able to build a better advisory? We are able to give them a sound advice in terms of raising the funds, in terms of making them feel what things have to go, how things have to be built, how they have to be reported, what are the different functionaries, what are the different guidelines, and how you need to report each and everything when it starts coming towards the customer ideology. Followed by the effect and analysis consultative group. This is another important thing. Why? Because after doing something, what is the repercussion of that? Now, that is a very, very important point. I might have done a mistake, but then what is the effect of the mistake? So this is the effect group which comes into picture and tries to analyze about the factor. They try to tell what are the effects in terms of reporting, what are the effects in terms of printing up a particular document or printing up a particular value altogether. So these are all something which are very, very important, very, very fundamental when we talk about, because these effects will actually try to make us understand how things are moving in terms of a consultative basis, in terms of a basic ideology altogether. So the effects will definitely matter to all of us, and it will actually try to tell us that, you know, each and every terminology, each and every factor, how it has been looked into. So there is a consultative group, there is a forum that's available to tell you what are the different factors. Next one is the emerging economies group that tries to tell you where are the new markets coming up, what are the new trends in terms of investment, which countries are becoming the attractive grounds for investment, how we can look into this country, what are the risk factors, what are the non-risk factors. So all those kind of patterns can be understood by the effective or the emerging economies group. Now, if you go through the WHO committee group website altogether, the WTO group, the UNDP, or probably the World Bank, the IMF, all these kind of websites, you will be able to see a report that has been spoken about the emerging economies. Why? Because if you look at India, if you look at Middle East, Russia, Brazil, or South Africa, these are all countries where there's a lot of scope in terms of economic development that we are speaking about. But then the emerging economies are not that easy to be deciphered. So you need an expert panel who go about telling you the risk pattern, who go about telling you how we can build rapport in these economies and how we can build in a better accounting standards that can provide us revenues and profits. Similarly, the financial crisis advisory group probably the role of this group is very, very evident in the modern times. Many a times when we read through the newspaper or when we go through the news channel, we are quite shocked to find out about the factor that so many banks have defaulted, so many companies have defaulted, so many companies have not been in a position to even manage the basic funds. There are so many companies which are crashing down because of the non-availability of fund, misrepresentation of statements, or they have not been in a position to manage the capital that they have garnered altogether. Why is this happening? Is because of the nature of business operation, or because of a calamity factor, or even to that matter that a pandemic like this which has been happening all through, sudden dip in business, no demand at all, the supply factor is completely falling apart. All these kind of patterns, when they start coming across in terms of business values, in terms of the business predictions altogether, it's quite evident and it's quite important to see that we are trying to bring in, or we are trying to set in some standards, we are trying to set in some, a backup agency who can help you out in a crisis. With regards to that, you have the Financial Crisis Advisory Group. They go ahead, they advise you, they help you out in terms of coming out of a financial crisis. They tell you how exactly things can be looked forward, how you need to build the rapport, how you need to take it forward and start building it together as a business entity. So what is the recovery procedure? What is the survival procedure? All is being given by the Iasb. Followed by the members of Iasb had initially a 14 full-time member board with each one vote. So definitely they are very powerful because they have the voting power altogether. They are selected group of experts with a mix of experience of standard setting, preparing, using accounts, market financial regulation, academic work, as well as diverse geographical backgrounds. That is very, very interesting to see from an Iasb standpoint altogether. Why? Because when you look at the Iasb, these 14 members have been drawn from 14 different geographies and they have been given a right to vote, which means they have some importance, they have some value, they have some standards altogether in terms of getting us into the business, into the ideologies altogether. They're not just people with a mere normal experience, but they are people with a great amount of experience, with a lot of valuable insight. Probably they're all researchers, they're all innovative people who have gone through the standards, who have gone through the entire paradigm of accounting. Now, when you look at the members with the ability to vote, that means to say that they have a capacity to whether go with an ordinance or to reject that ordinance. Now, when I say an ordinance, that might be a rule, that might be a standard which we need to set in accounting. It purely depends. Why? Because this 14 members will decide whether that could be bought as an international standard or that could be just rejected. Today, when you are talking about India as a subcontinent altogether, there are so many countries which are interested to invest in India, but they may not be belonging to Indian origin. So what kind of standards we need to set? Or tomorrow, if an Indian company wants to go abroad and start setting up a new standard, they want to bring in a new innovation in accounting standard, is it being accepted by the board? So that is where the members will play a great role in terms of setting up the things, in terms of making us understand whether this financial situation can be accepted, whether this regulatory policy can be bought in, whether we will be in a position to understand and take it forward. Plus, they also have a lot of academic work that goes in terms of accounting. What do you mean by academic work is that they have several doctoral candidates who join hands with them in terms of setting standards, in terms of undergoing the diversified information about an accounting process, about an accounting standard altogether. So when you collect those kind of information, when you start understanding how these kind of information is actually adding value to you, automatically you will be able to appreciate and you will be able to see that yes, we are building a better standard board. See, when you talk about the institution Institute of Chartered Accountants in India, or when you talk about the Institute of Company Secretaries in India, these are all boards that have been constituted not just to conduct an examination and select new members, but these are being constituted to guide the government, to guide the company on the right track. And if they need some sort of, a back check or a tracking facility altogether, these boards will go and advise them. So similarly, the International Accounting Standard Board is not going to take things lightly, but it is going to accept, it is going to build a system, it's going to make people understand the importance of each and every pattern, each and every standard that is being put across. So that's why these board members are actually very powerful people, and they are the people who guide the companies in terms of accounting standards. Now, the funding part of it, the funding for the IFRS comes from, it's a very, very major factor. Why? Because the IFRS Foundation raises the funds for operation. Majority of funding is from the voluntary contributions that you are seeing from the jurisdictions that they have put in place, the national financing regimes. There are many countries which contribute a part of their national income for the development of this board. The IFRS Foundation amounted to great billion pounds of 31 million, and out of which 20 million came from the contributions and 11 million came from self-generated revenues, that is from the publication and related activities. So primarily what I'm trying to tell you here is that this is a non-profit organization and it tries to raise fund from different sources altogether. So countries which are interested in developing their accounting standards, countries which feel that this can be given a higher weightage or importance, or we can contribute for the development of the board, they give the money, and through which the IASB accounts for its standards and they take it forward in terms of their development. With this, I come to the conclusion of this session. I believe that all the information shared here is of a high use and of a great resource for you. In the next session, we will be talking about the various accounting standards specifically related to the Indian accounting standards and the IFRS in comparison. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.